Let's go. Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface level stuff and into depths unknown. And we're going into depths unknown today with a very special guest, David Zäch, inventor of the Z score, inventor of the interview score. And I cannot wait to tell you guys more about these things and dive into them more with David. I really am a fan of your work, man. You seem like a very cerebral guy. So I'm going to get straight into it. Tell me about like where you came up with the Z score, or I meant to say the interview score. Sorry. Where you came up with that, and who's the smartest football player, currently active NFL football player that's fantasy relevant?
Current active one that's fantasy relevant. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on. And like I said, not a lot of people like to get into the weeds about a lot of different contexts adding to their fantasy takes. So I really appreciate you having me on and willing to learn more about it. As far as the active player that I've seen interview the best, it takes too much time to go through every single player. So when I was starting this out about 4 years ago, I wanted to just add context, right, to fantasy analysis. So we have a lot of stuff like yards per route run or yards per team pass attempt. A lot of other metrics that we have out there, especially for wide receivers specifically that we're just talking about right now, adjusting for conferences, draft pick, all that stuff, the combine, right? But I just felt like something was missing. And so about 5 years ago with the Fantasy Z score, that was kind of my holistic one. It includes grades and all the stats I mentioned, but I was looking at a lot of the research out there and a lot of the ranks that people would give on rookies. And I noticed that a lot of them were pretty 50-50 throughout each year. So I wanted to add another layer, and that's where the interview score was kind of born. I thought maybe if I get into the minds of some of these guys, or maybe they're giving something that other people aren't picking up on in their interviews, because GMs and teams clearly interview these players pretty deeply, and we don't get to see those. There's only so much we have access to, and guys like you who are able to go to the combine and ask those questions personally is a big selling point, because you get to learn more about a player, what makes them tick, what makes them drive, what they understand about the game, how they're going to fit into their new scheme with their new coaches and all that. So that's what I was trying to learn. And the first year I did it happened to be a smashing success, albeit very controversial, because the way I phrased it that first year was a bit off-putting to some. So that got a very... What's that?
What'd you call it? What do you mean?
Well, it was the interview score, but I happened to have a likability metric in there, and that that was a poor choice on my part. So like having a likability of a player. So big mistake on my part there, but awesome. I was just looking for anything, right? Like I'm always more curious than cautious. Obviously got burned on that one, but the interview score in general did very well, because that was the year that I gave Garrett Wilson a near perfect score. He went on to win Rookie of the Year. And that's when Jameson Williams, I gave a very poor score. He ended up getting suspended and having a lot of off-field issues. So it turned out to be incredibly accurate that year. And there's a lot of mixed results in the middle, but I'll go on to explain how I've learned to scale for that and adjust for that. But yeah, current player in the NFL, like I said, I haven't watched all of them. It takes a lot of time to be able to actually like sit and focus on the interviews. And I like to have a minimum of 3 per player. Otherwise, I don't feel like I get an accurate reflection of who they are or how they understand the game. But I like Garrett Wilson, Cooper Kupp are probably 2 of my top 2. And then, of course, we'll go on to talk about Emeka Egbuka, who I just blew away everything I know about my process, and he just
really
went above and beyond. So, yeah.
So, it's only for wide receivers. Is that correct? Like, why only wide receivers?
It currently is, because I was I'm good at running backs. Like I'm still confident to say that for a rookie, like the Fantasy Z score, it didn't need that additional context. And I also feel like they aren't able to separate as much when given just the volume that's there, because a lot of times injuries will happen or what have you. And a lot of what I was already measuring was doing it accurately enough, so I didn't need to. And then the last part of that is it just takes an incredible amount of time. So I started to try and dabble into quarterbacks kind of behind the scenes, but even that is just, it is so much work and understanding to try and figure out, what to take from the interviews for them. And it's different for each position. Like I've already noticed that, like running backs you'll look for different traits, and you do wide receivers and quarterbacks. It's almost all completely different other than high level, like understanding of the game, right? And what they need to do and how they read defenses. So
Yeah, that would have been my guess as to why wide receivers. That's why I asked. Like, you could really pick up something when you're listening to them break down a scheme or, finding a soft spot in the zone,
that's right.
several ways to kind of pick up on those cues of like, oh, this guy's got a high football IQ. So before we get into the good, let's start with like the ugly a little bit. Is Luther Burden really kind of, I think he was the lowest rated receiver in your interview score this class. And can you just talk to me a little bit more about why he was such a struggle?
Sure. So not to damper any Luther Burden fans out there, but he reminded me of, again, Jameson Williams, similar type of responses. So when I watch interviews, I go through, like I said, try to get at least 3 different interviews per player so I get good context on them. And Jameson Williams back then, like he didn't know how to answer anything. Like he didn't know hardly what the Lions were. They asked him about the team or who he's going to coach or play with, and he didn't know how to answer anything. They asked him aspects about his game. Obviously, he's come around in recent years. Like he's slowly been climbing, but it was a major hurdle for those first few years for him with the suspensions and the off the field issues and even getting on the field and being able to participate well. So yeah, Luther Burden, I didn't take away hardly anything from any interview. Oftentimes someone would ask like a really good question about his game, like how do you prepare for this specific defender that he was going up against? And then he would just dodge the question. He's like, well, you just got to prepare for every game. Like it's, a really important game. And it seemed like his every single response was like a determined or a pre-thought out response, that he was just giving generic answers to everything he could. And I don't know if that's, some people are nervous, right? So that's probably the hardest part, is dictating people who are shy or nervous versus people who like truly don't know or don't care at all. But when I was watching him, he gave me the vibes that he didn't know how to answer it. And so that tells me he was relying more on his talents and what he does well at, and where he's coached to go to. And, he's very explosive. Like I was watching him on film, and I graded him really high before I got to the interview score. Like he's a very explosive player, but when he would answer stuff, he wouldn't give you anything about it. He wouldn't break down the game. He wouldn't give you any tips about how he's reading coverages. And then it started to connect the dots with the films that like, okay, well, maybe he didn't run a full route tree because he wasn't able to pick up on some of it. But that's maybe a reach,
Yeah, we'll
assumption.
see.
But
Right? I mean, there's that if that's really cracking the code for why he had such a interesting usage in his junior year, and they kind of drew up a lot of Mickey Mouse routes for him, as
correct.
some
Yeah.
call it. Right? I'm gonna throw up the interview score on the screen here that you would put together. Are these all the receivers you did for this class?
Yeah. So the hard part, I try and do this before the draft, so I don't have, extra knowledge about the draft. I don't want the draft pick position swaying me. So I just look at general top prospects, right? Like there's some guys on here that didn't end up going in the top 3 rounds, but I try to limit it to roughly top 3 round players at, coming right out of college in between the draft. And that's what I stick with. I don't add or take away. Otherwise, I think it would be unfair, because I could bake in biases, right? Like adding Travis Hunter after he declared as a cornerback. So a lot of people ask about him, and at some point I might, put him in here, but I don't think it's fair knowing his draft capital and his situation now. I would probably have some bias, right? I might rank him a little higher, not knowing it, myself, but I would
Yeah.
try not to, but try and be as straightforward as possible. But
It's an interesting list. To your point, a perfect 100 for Egbuka. Is that the best interview score you've ever given someone?
that is undoubtedly the best score I've ever given someone. So he blew me away, and it was just a treat. Like watching any interview of his, it was like in the back of my head, it was like some philosopher mixed with some NFL coach that was talking directly to my soul when I just watch him speak. Because he would go on tangents and you'd get like lost in the moment. He'd be giving out life lessons, and I would forget that I'm even listening about football right now. Like talk about a cerebral guy, and he seems to have it all figured out. He gave answers I've never seen before. He went, above and beyond as far as depth in his answers, how he prepares, like how he studies cornerbacks before the games he's going up against, what he looks for, like the leverage he's looking at the guy's hips and stuff like that to set him up for his route. And I love hearing wide receivers talk about leverage or studying a defender, because that means they're taking their game very seriously. They're very studious. They're very prepared. They're very learned about the game and the nuances of the scheme that they're running in. So he just, everything I was looking for, he just smashed it. So he's my new gold standard is what I'm calling it so far. So if he's a bust this year, you could just throw everything I said out the window, because I'm letting a lot ride on him this year. But so far, the camp reports have been just outstanding, like between Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans and all the other players and coaches, they all just love him, and they speak similarly to how I described it. And that was, before the draft, before any of them even knew they were going to be on this team. So,
yeah, no, man, it's been fun seeing you kind of plant the flag right before the draft of, hey, this guy was a stud in the interviews. And then as early as camp reports can start coming out, they're like, this guy already knows the whole playbook. We're going to line him up all over the field. And I mean, that just, when you've got a guy who can slot into any wide receiver position as a rookie, A, that's rare, but B, that means that they're going to be able to, like, this whole, he's got Godwin and Evans in front of him. First off, Godwin's returning from an injury, right? Evans is a little old and has missed games in the past. And nobody, they play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So I think it's so cool that he can be an interchangeable chess piece for them. I think he's going to see the field a ton. And I think he's going to be really productive. And, that said, I'd love to hear a little bit more about like how you've been able to go back and kind of confirm that there's a strong correlation between the interview score and success fantasy wise. You kind of alluded to it with Garrett Wilson, but I imagine you kind of gathered some more data points. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So the biggest, I guess, misinterpretation of the interview score is it as a standalone metric, like to say anybody with a high grade is going to be better than the top 10 overall pick. Like that's not its intent. It's a scaling or an adding factor. So what I did a year ago, I think I sent you the tweet about adjusting draft capital with interview score, and the correlation nearly doubled to fantasy points. So if you just look at draft capital, that's kind of the holy grail of what a lot of metric analysts use for a correlation to points per game. So what I did is I took my interview score and adjusted it with just a very simple multiplying formula to draft capital. And it ended up, as you can see in the screen here, correlation to points per game. And again, this was a year ago, I believe, that I did this. So I got to update and add more names into it and all that. But it turned out, really, really good. So it boosts what we already know, or it dampens a player's expectations. And the second part of this, not just fantasy points per game, is I've learned that it's incredible at draft props. So over the last 3 years, I've been posting about draft props, and it's far more successful in the early rounds, I've noticed, than like mid, second, and later. Because then
like
it
a
gets
Jalen Noel, right? Like he was a guy who had a high interview score, but it's still kind of tough to bet that. We knew he was going to be a second or third round guy, so it's kind of hard to say, oh, this is going to vault him, much higher than those projections.
Right.
But some of those earlier, like assumed first round picks or borderline first, this can be a really good deciding factor that they're a first round pick instead of a borderline first round pick.
That's
like
right.
Emeka Egbuka in this scenario.
Yep, and I believe everyone in the first round or early second there that I had an above an 88, 87 is roughly average, what I call an average interview score. So that doesn't adjust their the rest of their profile for me up or down. That just keeps it neutral. Like Malik Neighbors, I believe, was an 88 or an 87. So that didn't boost or subtract his profile. It was just a standard wide receiver from what I got from what I was able to learn from his interviews. But whereas a guy like Egbuka, I boosted him a ton, and then he beat out his draft prop. So, and I bet, I do a lot of betting, a lot of fantasy people. Fantasy is betting, right? So I bet on props too, and yeah, those are nice hits. Like I always use them as a yeah, the gif in there.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I just threw up Keon Coleman to the Bills. It seemed like that was one that got you excited.
Yeah, and Worthy and
Did
Pearsall
he
both
interview well? Did Keon Coleman interview well? That one really got me.
I thought so. Everyone thinks he's kind of a dumb jock guy, right? But I liked what he said about his game. Like, yeah, he talks a little different than most people about
He's
his
a funny
game.
guy,
But
right?
he
He's a
is.
jokester a bit, but he was still able to seem like a student of the game and serious about his craft.
That's right. Yep. No, I liked him a lot. So I always push back because I got friends in like a group chat that always give me shit about him specifically because they just think he's a like kind of a goofy guy, right? But in what I was able to gather, and I would have more details in my notes but past years about him. But yeah, I really liked what he said, and he's obviously very confident in himself. But if you look closely enough, he does talk about his game and how he understands things and setting up leverage and stuff like that. And those are some of the top things I look for. And yeah, he was able to check quite a few boxes.
So I'm going all over the place a bit here, but like when we think about you had Worthy up there as well as a guy who I think you said had a good interview score, right?
Yeah, he's a 99. Yeah.
A 99. Wow. Okay, so a really, really strong interview score. We'll get back to him in a second. One guy I want to bring up while I'm thinking about it is the certified menace that is Rashee Rice. Did you track his interview score? Do you remember that by chance?
I did not. I had people ask for it afterwards, but he was not projected, I believe,
To be like
an
that
early pick.
Right?
Yeah, so then I missed out on him. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, I don't like going back because then I have a lot of context that I didn't have at the time that I think might affect my score. So I like to do them with as little outside noise as possible, apart from end of their college season to the draft, because so much happens after the draft, right? Like you get so much more new info, new context on players. But
yeah, and you would have learned he was a menace who was like shooting into his. There was an SMU like basketball player who was at a practice or a game, and he like shot up his empty car, and then his mom stealing packages, and then this guy's like
I heard that one too.
Driving and running, fleeing the scene of a crime with weapons. Like, I mean, this guy, he's just a bad dude. And like, I have a little bit of conscience when I'm drafting my fantasy teams. Like, part of me is because like I'd like, karma is gonna come back around, right? And so, anyways, I just thought that was an interesting call out between. I would imagine his score wouldn't have been like he could. I haven't dug into his interviews around how he plays, how he approaches the game per se, but just there might be some like more reason to lean into Worthy in that regard, like because you have speak so highly of him, and we've just seen Rice kind of prove himself to be a bonehead. Right. The other guy you had on that tweet was Ricky Pearsall. Man, my wife went to UF, so I'm a Gators fan. I've watched him. I'm a big fan. Very athletic, great RAS. Absolutely love the landing spot. Goes higher than anyone would have thought in the first round. Gets shot, has kind of a wash of a rookie year, showed some promise at the end, though. What do you think about him in his sophomore season? Like, my Ricky's exposure is pretty damn high. I'm not going to lie. Should I feel comfortable about that? Do you think he's going to take like that big leap this year?
Oh, I sure do. He was a 99 as well. So there's been 4 99s and 1 100. So the 99s are Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers, Xavier Worthy, and Ricky Pearsall, and the 100 is Egbuka. So I think very highly of all these players. I'm overexposed on all of them in Dynasty, and my underdog exposure on Pearsall. He's my third or fourth most owned wide receiver, so I'll be right there with you. But
Yeah, cool.
yeah, talk about a student of the game, though. He had some incredible answers, especially like there was one interview he did like in the bar of his hometown. By his college campus or something like that, with just a hometown beat reporter, and his answers just blew me away, especially in the context around him. Like there's people having beers behind him and stuff like that. So if you're dissecting the game, yeah, giving insights to his life and like thinking really hard about it, but it just comes natural to him. So that was probably the biggest take about I guess how he composes himself is like it's like breathing to him, like understanding the game and studying everything he can to get better at his craft. That was one thing that stood out. It was very natural for him. So I really was attracted to that.
Well, that's awesome, man. I am a huge fan of the interview score. It brings another component to the bigger picture of like we have the athleticism, we have the production, those stats that we can use to paint the picture, but getting that like cerebral element in your analysis is like to me the cherry on top. But as you mentioned, when you do a lot of great work, and to your point, it's just one piece of the bigger puzzle. So we're going to talk about your Z score when we get back. So don't go anywhere.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February and dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
Yes, sir. It's draft season. Tons of drafts underway. We're going to give you some more insights so you can go and enter some FFPC drafts and win some big money. So, David, like I said, you're really one of my favorites in the business in terms of the analysis you put in, the way you are not afraid to look at things through a different perspective. So we're going to get into that with your Z score a little bit, because there's some things as I was preparing for the show, I'm like, you've had a little bit of back and forth with some of the people about like, what do you mean by athleticism with Cam Scatterbo? So I don't want to, give away too much. So first and foremost, can you just talk about like this Z score a little bit more? How long you've been doing it? Any big, successes or lessons learned?
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, I'm trying to get a lot of different aspects of what makes a good fantasy player, right? Especially for Dynasty. So this is a long-term forward-thinking process. Like it might not hit year one. So for example, I'm building my models for wide receivers based on their production in years 2 through 4 of the NFL season. So there's a very long tenured view at, how a player is going to perform. It's not just year one, right? So, and for running backs, I use years 1 through 3 because I'm kind of trying to find the prime of a player, right? Wide receivers typically peak, years 2 through 4. Running backs early on, they spike higher, and then they become elite, and then they trail off faster. So that's kind of the basis of it. And then I've been kind of tweaking and evolving it over the years. I think I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now. First year was just building it out, seeing how things work, seeing how accurate it was. And any model that's worth anything always needs adjustments over the years. Like stats change, metric correlation changes, predictability of certain stats aren't always the same year after year. The NFL itself is changing, right? How they view players changes, how they perform in college changes, especially with transfers and all this now. makes it even more complicated. So what I'm trying to do is get every meaningful piece of data that I can, whether that's stats, whether that's what college they went to, whether that's film grades, and whether that's interview scores, so be it. I'm just trying to get anything that matters that can add context to give us the most accurate representation. And of course, I miss just like everyone else, but I'm trying to give the best chance that I can at success to find ceiling and floor of players and longevity. So I can talk about the different categories I use for each if you want to go through those and how I kind of develop them.
Yeah, I was going to throw up the graphic you put together for running backs because I think it's really interesting. I mean, certainly talk through them, and I'll kind of call out when we look at, the kind of overall buckets you've put here: draft capital, dynamic athleticism score, college production adjusted, film grade, and lack of fantasy competition. You put those all together to kind of give an overall Z score, and then expected points per game for a 3-year window for running backs. Just kind of spelling this out for the listeners who can't see what's on the screen right here. The thing that I want to call out as you talk through this is that dynamic athleticism score first. That is so interesting to me. You'll see a guy, the best athleticism score you see here is Cam Scatabo. You gave him an A. You give a guy like Quinshon Judkins, who absolutely destroyed the combine, a C-. And I read into your answer on that, and it was really interesting. But I think I would be, if I was just a casual viewer, I'd be asking myself, what the heck? So can you, maybe talk through these a little bit more and what goes into them, but don't shy away from that athleticism piece.
Sounds good. Okay, so each of these categories, there's 5 categories for running backs, carry a different weight. So draft capital obviously means a lot. That carries, 25% of the weight of this whole metric. And there's an expected points per game for a first-round draft pick or a top 10 draft pick or a third-round draft pick. So that gives us kind of the baseline, and everything's sort of adjusting it from there. So that's the first category, and it's very basic, right? Like the entire world understands that. You get drafted higher, you're expected to score more points. Sure. Dynamic athleticism score is, like you said, what I get the most pushback on. But I have trouble displaying athleticism for a running back simply as how they perform in a combine, like how big and fast they are, because that's how most people view athleticism, right? So you'll see Judkins, he's a bigger guy, run a fast 40. Everyone's like, wow, he's athletic. And I'm like, sure, he's athletic in that respect, but what makes a good football athlete? Would a guy like Keen Nwagwu, who is super heavy, super fast, everyone called him very athletic, but by my standards, he wasn't, because I'm looking at more things. Does it take athleticism to run a route and catch a ball for a running back? That's important. That's athleticism in my mind. So I put that in there. Does it take athleticism to get yards after contact and break tackles? Very much so for a running back, right? So I want that in there. And I want anything that's related to athleticism and how I see it as a whole at the position. It's not just a track meet, right? It's not just running a straight line or running the 3-cone. Like, it's how you apply that in the game of football is what matters to me, because that's what's going to translate to fantasy points. A guy who can't break tackles worth anything, I don't really want him on my team or my fantasy team, right? So Judkins, his broken tackle rate was an abysmally low 18% his final year. A lot of people push back on that and cite his previous years, but over the years, I've looked at career traits for collegiate performance versus final year. And for running backs, it's far more important the final year of their production, because that gets closest to their NFL window, and it seems to be a better reflection of how they're going to perform.
Sticky.
Yep. So that's what I run with. I run with final year metrics in a lot of mine, and he had 18%. And I put out a list, the red flag list every year of top prospects who have a broken tackle rate under 19%, I think it is. And the list is just a complete graveyard of busts and running backs who didn't work out. So that makes me terrified of Judkins, albeit recently I started adjusting it for strength of schedule that they faced in college. And Judkins had a harder strength of schedule, so maybe that explains his low broken tackle rate. Even still, that's still a big red flag for me. But that's what I mean by football athleticism. So yes, Judkins can run fast in a straight line, and he's big. Both are good things, but how poorly he did at the broken tackle rate concerns me. And then the final part of dynamic athleticism score is their receiving ability and how much they were used as a receiver and, multifaceted, right? A guy who can only run through the A gap is far less valuable than a guy that can run, anywhere on the field, like through the middle to the outside, run a route, right? And that's what Scatable can do. He can go anywhere, right? He's a tremendous receiver, as we can see, like the training camp reports showing like one-handed grabs over cornerbacks and safeties and stuff like that already. So that's what I think is really impressive, that people miss the mark on athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting list, dude. You weren't afraid to be a little bit bold there, right? With Cam Scatabo coming out as RB3 in this projections. It seems like he's a guy you're probably overweight on in a lot of drafts, I'd imagine.
Very much so. Yep. I'm a hardcore truther for him. So I think he takes the job from Tyrone Tracy and becomes the running back one and does well. Granted, they have a terrible O-line or projected O-line that they're supposed to have.
Right?
Yeah. So I'm definitely worried about that. But the rest of his profile looks great. Like the production he had was very good. Obviously, I think, what was he, top 5 in Heisman voting, if I'm correct, as well. So yeah, just things look very, very, very good for him. And then, like I said, I adjust everything for strength of schedule and strength of the team, so that boosts him, even further. So I really like him. Yep. And then of course the film grades as well. So
yeah, man, really great stuff today. I don't want to give away all your treasures and troves. So if you guys want to see more of David's work, go follow him on X at David Zäch or Zach, but it's spelled Zach 16. David Zach 16 on X. One of my favorite follows. Like just clamoring for this stuff in the off season, for your interview scores, for your Z scores. Really thankful that you were willing to hop on the show and kind of give a peek behind the veil to the guests of everything that goes into these and sort of the merit behind them. Close it out for me. Anything we missed, anything you want to call attention to, and anything else you want to plug that I didn't besides your X page?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me on, and draft Egbuka, I would say.
You will not be sorry. First 100 in the interview score history. You heard it here first. Dynasty Deep Dive. If you like the show, give it a thumbs up. Comment any questions you've got for David and I. And please subscribe to the Player Profiler channel, because we're going to have awesome guests like David coming at you all season long and for eternity. So good luck winning your fantasy leagues, everyone.